Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive.
Oh, it's great to be back.
This time, we're taking you back to the 1940s,
Ah, yes.
to a time when New York City was bustling with glamour and promise.
The city that never sleeps.
Exactly, but also a time when danger lurked in the shadows, waiting to snare the unsuspecting.
I like where this is going.
Today's story is about Pearl Lusk, a young woman who came to the Big Apple with dreams as big as the skyscrapers.
Oh, she reminds me of so many people who flocked to the city back then, all wide-eyed and full of hope.
Right. I mean, can you imagine leaving everything you know behind for a chance at a new life?
It must have been exhilarating and terrifying all at the same time.
Oh, absolutely.
So tell me more about Pearl.
Well, picture this. 1946, Pearl, just 19 years old, leaves the quiet streets of Quakertown, Pennsylvania, for the electrifying energy of New York City.
A small-town girl in the big city, classic story.
It is, and she dove right in. She found a job as a salesgirl at the Oppenheim Collins department store in Manhattan.
Oh, a department store, how glamorous. I bet she loved that.
And she found a room on the Upper West Side.
Perfect for a young woman finding her way.
She was living the dream. Decorating her apartment, going on lunch dates with friends, exploring the city.
It sounds idyllic, almost like a scene from a movie.
It does, doesn't it?
But something tells me this is about to take a darker turn.
You're right on the money.
Go!
Right after the holiday season, Pearl's dream took a hit when she was laid off from her job.
Oh, how unfortunate.
It was a blow. Suddenly, that exciting city life felt a lot less secure.
Of course, being laid off is never easy, but in a city as big and expensive as New York, it must have been especially daunting.
Exactly.
And I imagine this is where our story really gets going.
It is, and it starts with two seemingly chance encounters with a handsome stranger.
Ooh, a handsome stranger. This sounds intriguing.
This man, who called himself Alan LaRue, first crossed paths with Pearl on Thanksgiving Day.
Thanksgiving Day. That's interesting timing.
Isn't it? And then they ran into each other again right after Christmas.
Two encounters in such a short period of time.
And Alan, always the charmer, offered Pearl a lifeline, a job.
Well, that's convenient. A handsome stranger offering a solution to her problems.
He claimed to be a private investigator working for an insurance company that specialized in jewelry.
Oh, a private investigator. No, that's a twist.
He even spun a tale about a woman named Olga, a secretary at the Cudahy Hat Company, who had supposedly stolen some jewels.
So he was setting the stage for some kind of mystery.
Exactly.
And poor Pearl, fresh out of work, was probably eager to take any opportunity that came her way.
Oh, she was.
So what did he have her do?
Well, first, he gave her a picture of this Olga woman.
To identify her, I assume.
Yep. And then he even had Pearl go to the hat company to make sure she could pick Olga out of a crowd.
Getting her more involved step by step.
Exactly. Drawing her deeper into this web of his.
He was good at what he did, wasn't he?
It seemed like it, at least at first.
So what was the next step in his plan?
Alan told Pearl to meet him at his apartment for the next phase of the investigation.
Okay, meeting at his apartment alone. That's when alarm bells would be ringing for me.
Oh, for sure.
But I guess in the 1940s, things were different.
Right. And I'm sure Pearl, a big fan of detective novels, was intrigued by this whole thing.
Ah, so she was caught up in the excitement of a real-life mystery.
Totally. But things took a strange turn at that meeting.
Okay, tell me more.
Alan presented Pearl with what he claimed to be an X-ray camera.
An X-ray camera? Now that's interesting.
Right. But get this, it wasn't some high-tech gadget. It was a shoebox wrapped in brown paper.
A shoebox, come on.
I know. It had a hole cut in it and a wire loop sticking out.
Oh, my.
Alan claimed this contraption could somehow capture images of the stolen jewelry hidden beneath Olga's clothing.
Now that's a bit far-fetched, even for the 1940s.
It is, but remember, Pearl was young, and she didn't know any better.
So what was she supposed to do with this X-ray camera?
Alan instructed her to follow Olga on her commute back to Brooklyn and secretly snap a picture.
Oh, so he wanted her to basically spy on this woman with a shoebox.
Pretty much.
Wow, this Alan character was something else.
He was a piece of work, that's for sure.
So did Pearl go through with it?
She did. She followed Olga onto the subway, and when they got to Brooklyn, Pearl pretended to adjust her stocking and snapped a picture with the shoebox.
Of course, no jewelry showed up.
No, surprise, surprise.
I bet Alan had a ready-made excuse.
Oh, he did. He blamed it on the faulty camera and promised to get a better one.
Keeping her hooked, reeling her in further.
Exactly. He was a master manipulator.
So what happened next?
Well, on New Year's Eve, Alan met Pearl at a laundromat near Union Square.
Laundromat, huh? Keeping it casual, I see.
And he gave her a new and improved X-ray camera.
Okay, let me guess another shoebox.
Well, it was a box,
Figures.
but this one was bigger and heavier.
Did it at least come with some fancy upgrades?
Oh yeah, it was wrapped in Christmas paper.
A Christmas present? How festive.
He told Pearl that new intel suggested Olga was now hiding the jewelry pinned inside her dress.
Oh, so she needed to aim the camera lower this time.
You got it.
Setting the stage for disaster, I presume.
You're way ahead of me.
So Pearl followed his instructions again.
She did. Once again, she boarded the subway with Olga.
Oh, this poor woman.
And as they were about to get off, Pearl positioned herself behind Olga, aimed the camera, and pulled the wire.
I think I know what's coming next.
And the box exploded.
Oh,
It was chaos.
I can only imagine.
When the dust settled, Pearl saw Olga lying on the ground.
Oh, no.
Her leg was nearly blown off.
Oh, that's awful.
And who do you think was standing there covered in blood, holding the smoking camera?
Pearl.
Pearl.
Oh, dear God.
The security guard rushed over and demanded to know what happened.
What did she say?
Pearl, still in shock, stammered that she was just taking a picture when someone shot Olga.
Oh, what a tangled web we weave.
Then the police arrived.
And things went from bad to worse, I imagine.
Oh, much worse.
How so?
They opened the camera, and it wasn't a camera at all.
What was it then?
It was a sawed-off 12-gauge shotgun hidden between two wooden cream cheese boxes.
Cream cheese box.
Yeah, cream cheese boxes.
Ah, that's chilling.
It was right then that Pearl's world came crashing down around her.
It must have hit her like a ton of bricks that she had been manipulated into this horrifying situation.
Exactly.
They took Pearl into custody right away.
Oh, I can only imagine.
She was in complete shock, tears streaming down her face, trying to tell her side of the story.
And I bet her story sounded absolutely unbelievable.
It did, but the thing is, it was true.
She had no idea what she was truly involved in.
She kept insisting that Alan LaRue had hired her and that she genuinely believed she was helping catch a jewel thief.
I mean, it sounds crazy, right?
It does sound crazy, but the police, even though they were skeptical at first, they started to think maybe, just maybe, she was telling the truth.
So what changed their minds?
Well, there was this one moment that really shifted things.
What happened?
They showed Pearl a photograph of Olga and her husband, Al Rocco.
Rocco. Wait a minute, is that where Alan LaRue comes in?
Yep, that's him, Al Rocco.
So Alan LaRue was an alias all along.
Exactly, just a made-up name to hide his true identity.
Wow, so this wasn't just a random act of violence. It was planned.
It was a carefully orchestrated act of revenge.
By Olga's husband.
By Olga's husband, that's right.
I mean, that's chilling.
It is, and as the investigation dug deeper into Al Rocco's past, they uncovered a really disturbing pattern of abuse.
Oh no.
And it was clear that this violence had been escalating for quite some time.
And the sources mentioned that Olga had actually reported Al to the police multiple times before.
She did. She tried to get help.
But it seems like they didn't do much to protect her.
It's really troubling to see how her pleas for help were ignored.
It makes you wonder, how bad did things have to get before someone would listen to her?
Right. It's a question that haunts this whole case.
So let's rewind a bit. Can you tell me more about Al and Olga's relationship?
They met in the spring of 1944 and dated for about a year before getting married in May of 1945.
Okay, and what was Al like?
Well, that's the thing. Even Olga's parents, who had known him for a year, admitted they knew very little about him. It's like he was intentionally keeping people at arm's length.
Keeping his true self hidden.
Exactly. And even after they got married, details about Al were scarce.
So what did they know?
They knew he was of average height and build, maybe Italian, but that's about it.
Nothing about his work.
Nothing. And get this. He would often disappear for months at a time.
Months?
Months. Sometimes he'd come back with money, sometimes not.
That sounds suspicious.
It does, doesn't it? Like he was involved in something shady.
Right. And how was their marriage?
Well, it was turbulent to say the least.
Turbulent how?
There was abuse.
Oh, no.
And when they separated in early November of 1946, Al's behavior became much worse.
In what way?
Olga's mother said that he started harassing her constantly, threatening to kill her if she didn't come back to him.
Oh, that's terrifying.
And these weren't empty threats, unfortunately.
What do you mean?
There were two incidents that happened before the subway shooting that really show how dangerous this man was.
Can you tell me about them?
The first one happened in mid-October of 46.
Okay.
Al confronted Olga at the Times Square train station.
Right in the middle of everything.
Yep. He pulled out a switchblade, forced her into his car, and drove her all the way to a motel in Poughkeepsie.
Wow. That's terrifying.
He made her undress, hid her clothes, and held her captive there for 2 days.
2 days. My God.
The whole time he was threatening to kill her if she didn't get back together with him.
I can't even imagine what she must have been going through.
Somehow, Olga managed to convince him to take her back to the city, and she immediately ran to her parents' house in Brooklyn.
But did it stop there?
It didn't.
What happened?
Just a few weeks later, Al shot Olga
He shot her.
through an open window in her mother's kitchen.
Oh my God.
2 bullets hit her right thigh.
Oh no.
And one of those bullets, a .45 caliber slug, it stayed lodged in her leg.
She must have been in agony.
She was, and it left her with a permanent limp.
You would think that after something like that, the police would have taken action.
You think so, right? But
Yeah.
nothing much happened.
You're kidding.
Both the kidnapping and the shooting, they were reported to the police. Olga gave detailed statements, and it seems like they just didn't do anything about it.
That's unbelievable.
It's a classic example of how the system failed her.
It's infuriating.
It is, and the harassment didn't stop there.
What else did he do?
He kept calling her every day, threatening her, and he would stalk her.
Stalk her where?
At the train station, on the streets, he was relentless.
I bet she was constantly looking over her shoulder.
She was living in fear, absolutely.
There's one story in the sources that really stuck with me.
Oh, tell me about it.
One day, Olga was entering the Times Square station, and she saw Al right behind her.
Oh, God.
She was terrified, so she paid her fare and went straight to the subway guard on the stairs.
Wow.
She begged for help. She told him that her ex-husband was dangerous and that he was threatening her. She even asked if she could just stand with the guard until Al left.
What did the guard say?
He refused. He said he couldn't help because it would block the flow of passengers.
He turned her away?
He turned her away,
Knowing that she was in danger.
knowing she was in danger.
That's heartbreaking.
It is. And the worst part is, it wasn't the last time her pleas for hope were ignored.
It seems like no one was taking her seriously.
Exactly. And the scariest part is that Al's threats didn't stop there.
What else happened?
Just 3 days before the subway shooting, Al showed up at Olga's family's home.
Oh, no.
He was shouting, threatening to kill her and himself.
My God.
The police came the next evening to take a statement, but they didn't do much else. They just told her they would protect her and give her an escort to work.
Empty promises.
Exactly. Because when Olga left for work the next morning, there were no detectives there.
No one to protect her.
The only person with her was her sister.
It's just unbelievable how many times the system failed her.
It's tragic, knowing what was about to happen.
So we have Pearl, caught in this web of lies and manipulation.
And Olga, desperately trying to get help from a system that wasn't listening.
And at the center of it all is El Rocco, this shadowy figure pulling all the strings.
Determined to have his revenge, no matter the cost.
So there's Olga in the hospital fighting for her life, and Pearl's stuck in custody as a material witness.
And Al's still out there somewhere.
Right, and the authorities knew they had to do something, finally.
Yeah, after all this time.
So they launched a full-scale manhunt for El Rocco.
I can't believe it took something this drastic for them to finally take action.
It's sad truth, isn't it?
So did Al try to contact Pearl at all after the shooting?
Well, the police thought he might try, maybe to silence her or something.
Makes sense.
So they took her back to her rooming house and waited.
For how long?
For hours, but Al never called.
That must have been nerve-wracking, just waiting, not knowing what was going to happen.
Oh, absolutely. It was a tense situation for sure.
So what do they do next?
They started digging into Al's past, hoping to find something, anything, that could lead them to him.
And did they find anything useful?
They uncovered some petty crimes, like car theft, disorderly conduct, that sort of thing.
Nothing too serious.
No, not really. And they found a psychological evaluation that had been done on him a few years earlier.
Oh, what did that say?
It said he was of average intelligence.
So not a criminal mastermind then?
No, more like a cunning opportunist.
Someone who knew how to manipulate people.
Exactly. And that made him even more dangerous.
So how did they finally catch him? Did someone recognize him?
Well, there was a tip that came in from someone in Brooklyn.
Oh.
They said they saw a man matching Al's description take off his clothes and walk into the ocean on New Year's Day.
Wow. That's a strange one.
It was, and the police searched for hours, but they didn't find anything.
So a dead end.
It seems so, yeah. The
Yeah.
clothes they found on the beach weren't even his.
Just a weird coincidence then.
Yep. Just another strange twist in this whole crazy story.
So the search continued.
It did, and the break they were looking for came a few days later from a very unexpected source.
Who was it?
This is where it gets a little complicated.
Oh.
A man showed up at the house of Al's cousin's neighbor.
Okay, Al's cousin's neighbor.
Yep, and this man claimed to be a friend of Al's cousin's neighbor.
Wait, so a friend of the neighbor?
Right, are you following?
I think so.
Good, because it gets even more convoluted.
Oh, boy.
This guy, who called himself Alan Lamonte, said he had inherited a bunch of tools.
Tools.
Yeah, tools, and he needed to deliver them to Al's cousin who lived in the Catskills.
Okay.
But his car had broken down, so he asked the neighbor for a ride.
And the neighbor agreed.
He did. The neighbor's wife even called Al's cousin to confirm the story.
And the cousin just went along with it.
Well, he didn't recognize the name Alan Lamonte, but he said he'd take the tools.
Wow, I can't believe they were so trusting.
I know, right? They even had Alan over for dinner before driving him to the Catskills the next morning.
So they had no idea who he really was.
No idea.
This is unbelievable.
Well, I know, right? So they're driving to the Catskills, and they stop for lunch at a diner.
Okay.
Alan finishes his meal first and tells the couple that he'll run ahead to get the tools, which are supposedly just a few blocks away.
Oh, no, I see where this is going.
He told them he'd take their car and meet them there.
But he never showed up.
Nope, he was gone.
So Roco conned them into giving him a ride all the way to the Catskills.
He did. He was a master manipulator, that's for sure.
And then what happened?
Well, the neighbor and his wife waited for 2 hours.
2 hours.
Yep, and then they finally called the police.
I bet they were in shock.
They were, and that's when the police realized that Alan Lamonte was actually Al Rocco all along.
It's incredible how he managed to pull that off.
I know, but his luck was about to run out.
How so?
The police were hot on his trail.
Did they catch him?
There was a chase, a big one. Over 50 state troopers and 2 detectives from New York City were involved.
Wow, they were serious about catching him this time.
Oh, yeah. They were determined to bring him in.
So what happened?
They cornered Al in the woods near a town called Gilboa.
Okay.
He abandoned the stolen car and ran into the woods, and then he forced his way into a farmhouse.
He took hostages.
He did. He held the couple who lived there at gunpoint.
Oh, no.
He demanded food and shelter, said he was going to stay there.
Did he hurt them?
No, luckily not, but he was clearly getting desperate.
What happened next?
After a few hours, he suddenly changed his mind and ran back into the woods.
I bet the police were closing in by then.
They were, and the farmhouse couple, they called the police right away.
So they knew where he was?
Yep, they tracked him down to a spot where he was hiding in a sleeping bag.
And then what?
They told him to surrender, but he refused.
Oh, no.
One of the troopers fired a warning shot.
And
Al pulled out his gun and fired 4 shots at the officers.
he shot at them. That's it then.
It was. The troopers fired back.
And they killed him.
Yes, Al Rocco was killed in the shootout.
Wow, what a dramatic end to this whole ordeal.
It is, isn't it?
After all the pain he caused, all the fear and manipulation, it finally ended there in the woods.
It's a tragic ending, but in a way, it brought a sense of relief, you know?
I can imagine at least Olga could finally feel safe.
Exactly. She didn't have to live in fear anymore.
What happened to Pearl?
Well, after Al's death, the judge dismissed the charges against her, and she was released.
That's good to hear.
She went back to Pennsylvania with her mother.
And what about Olga?
Olga, she had to have her leg amputated.
Oh my God, that's terrible.
I know, and she spent weeks in the hospital recovering.
I can't even imagine the pain she went through, both physically and emotionally.
She was incredibly strong, though.
Did she ever sue the city?
She did. She filed a lawsuit for $200,000.
$200,000, wow.
She claimed that the police were negligent and that their inaction directly contributed to her injuries.
That seems pretty clear-cut, didn't it?
It did, but the state Supreme Court ruled in favor of the city.
They did.
They said there was no legal basis to hold the city responsible for anticipating that Olga would be shot.
But she had reported Al multiple times.
I know, it's a tough pill to swallow.
Just doesn't seem right.
It doesn't, but that's how it ended up.
So what happened to Olga and Pearl after all of that?
Well, they actually formed a bond.
Really?
Yeah, they stayed in touch, supported each other.
That's amazing considering everything they went through.
Olga ended up having a really successful career designing jewelry.
That's great to hear. I'm so glad she found some happiness.
Me too. And Pearl got married and had children.
It's nice to know that they both found some peace in the end.
It is. It's a reminder that even after something so horrific, there's still hope for healing.
This has been a wild deep dive.
It has, hasn't it?
From mistaken identities to a shotgun disguised as a Christmas present, it's hard to believe it's all true.
Truth is often stranger than fiction.
That's for sure.
This case really makes you think about how easy it is to be manipulated, even when you think you're being careful.
It does, and it highlights how important it is to listen to victims and take their fears seriously.
Absolutely. We have to do better.
We all have a responsibility to look out for each other and speak up when we see something wrong.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Thanks for joining me on this deep dive. It's been eye-opening, to say the least.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.